I met my girlfriend when I was living in a bustling city. She worked at the same office as I did. We had known each other for like a year or two when we started dating. She would tell me stories about her hometown and the paranormal activities that occurred there. She was one of those people who are deeply interested in the paranormal. I did not believe her stories because I didn't believe in paranormal stuff. She would always look so full of life whenever she talked about paranormal activities or stories she had heard from other people. After a few months since we started dating, she got a job at her hometown and moved there. I wanted to go there with her, but there were no job openings there, not for the first few months at least. I applied for a few jobs in her town and finally was able to land one. I could not wait to see her again because I hadn't seen her for months. I remember how Diana and her family welcomed me with open arms when I first entered the town. They fed me delicious food at her home, and I formed bonds with her family. In addition to her parents, she had a little sister who was the world to her. Her sister was called Lily. She was a shy, quiet little girl who barely spoke to anyone. Diana had told me how often Lily got sick, and how no doctors knew what was wrong with her. Diana would tell me how she and her family thinks that something else was causing Lily to get sick so often. On that day when her family welcomed me, her dad Daniel took me into his room. I wondered what he was trying to do. "Son, I heard that you're gonna live in this town," Daniel said, his gaze fixed on me. I nodded in response to his question. "Then there are rules that you must follow." Daniel cleared his throat. "Do not fish at the pier past 12 a.m. in the night. Do not go into the woods past 9 p.m. And finally, do not go anywhere near the beach to the south at sunset. This final rule is one you must never break under any circumstances." I nodded. Even though I did not believe him, I believed that everything must have a scientific explanation, and paranormal stuff are made up by people as a way to pass time or for entertainment. After that, I went back to dine with the rest of the family. The rest of the day went normal. Obviously, I couldn't stay at Diana's house, so I ended up renting a place close by to her place. We would go on dates occasionally as I got used to her town. Even though I did not believe her father Daniel had said, I avoided breaking the rules he mentioned out of respect for him. One day, when we were on a date at a local cafe, I brought up what her dad talked about with me. His list of rules. "Yeah," she said, "as long as you are not there at the times my dad mentioned, you're safe." I have to admit, the creepiness of those rules were getting to me. At first, I had thought that this was all a ploy by her dad to get me to break up with her. But seeing as how she herself validated his rules, I was not so sure anymore. As I grew more accustomed to the town, I would go to this beautiful beach to relax. I would use this swing in the woods that led to the beach. I could get a good view of the beach from there. There was always this one kind old lady, let's call her Matilda, who would talk to me whenever she saw me there. She would come there almost every evening to get wood to burn. I enjoyed those days. I enjoyed our conversations. She would tell me stories of the past, about the time when she was young. And at every day, when sunset draws near, she would hurry home after telling me that I should not stick around longer, even though I would have done so without her telling me. And one day, when I was chilling on a bench at the beach at evening, I fell asleep, because I had not slept well the previous night. I had a strange nightmare of an old man strangling me when I was on the bench and woke up. No one was there. It was quiet, with the sound of waves splashing. It was dark, with the clouds in the sky shaded with red. I looked at the time. It was already sunset. All of a sudden, I felt a chill run down my spine, like I was not alone. I quickly got back into the woods, to go back home. As I was walking in the woods, I saw the old lady, the same one who would always talk to me in the distance. She was standing completely still, with her back turned. I did not notice it until I got close enough to her. She had no feet, and she was hovering above the ground. She turned around to look at me. Her eye sockets were empty, and she was grinning from ear to ear. It was not humanly possible. The minute that happened, I heard sounds of women laughing from all directions. They sounded hysterical. I covered my ears and turned my eyes away from her. And then, when I looked at where she was before, she was gone. I ran as fast as possible. The laughing voices were still there, echoing from all directions. Their volume did not change no matter how far I went. I covered my ears and made my way towards home. The people on the street shot me weird glances, as though they were staring at someone who went insane. As soon as I entered my house, The laughing voices stopped. It was as quiet as it had always been. I went into my room and plucked the courage to look through ģHE window. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I looked at the sunset sky and wondered if this was going to continue. At that point, Daniel's warnings replayed in my head. Don't go anywhere near the south beach at sunset. I wondered if this was the beach that he had talked about with me before. I was worried about what might come next. I stopped going to that beach, but the feeling was always there. I felt like something was watching me no matter where I went. Sometimes I would feel someone touching my shoulder or pull my clothes lightly, and no one would be there when I would turn around to look. I did not tell Diana nor anyone about this. I believed that it was my burden and my burden alone. I did not see the old woman either. For days, ever since this happened, I used my free time to walk around town. I did not pay attention at the time, but I would never see the old woman when I walked around town. Many days passed this way, without further incident. One day, as I was going back home from work, I noticed the old lady standing there in the woods. She gestured me to come closer, but I was too afraid to go to her. She kept gesturing over and over, but I paid no heed to her. As I passed by her, I gave her a glance. She looked normal, like she usually does. I still could not get over how creepy she looked at sunset on the last day I saw her. Seeing how she looked normal, I told myself that whatever I saw and heard the other day must have been my imagination. As soon as I went up to her, she smiled. "Hey, Sonny," she said. "It's been a while since we last saw each other. How have you been doing?" "I have been fine, I guess," I answered. "Sonny, I have a present for you. Can you come with me?" the old lady eagerly asked. "Sure, I guess," I answered with a moment of hesitation. After gesturing me to follow her, she took me to her house in the town. It looked beautiful. As though it was built yesterday, it was filled with lights. Upon entering her house, I noticed that it was completely empty. "Do you live here alone?" I asked, my tone curious. "Yes, I have a few children, but they are all out of town," she answered. She led me into the living room and gestured me to wait. The house was well lit, with a lot of colorful, small lights. It looked as though the house was prepared for a party. Not too long after, she brought me a slice of chocolate cake. "Take a bite, Sonny," she said eagerly. Without wasting any time, I took a bite from the chocolate cake. But the minute I did that, it tasted like mud, and I instantly spat it out. The old lady was still there, observing me eagerly. She started laughing. "Sonny, take another bite," she said. "It tastes terrible," I said to her. She looked disappointed, and then she took the cake slice and went out of the living room. I was puzzled as to why the cake tasted like mud when it was clearly a chocolate cake. I still had the bad taste of it in my mouth. It was enough to make me feel extremely nauseous. I could not stay there any longer, so I went out of the house and rushed towards mine. I was getting weird looks from people on the street again, like I was an insane person. I could not stop to think about it at the time because I was too nauseous. As soon as I got back home, I vomited in my bathroom on the toilet. I did not look at it and flushed the toilet. My whole body felt weak, as though I had a bad fever. I laid down on my bed to rest and fell asleep briefly. I woke up from my phone ringing. It was Diana calling me. I picked up. "Babe, are you okay?" Diana sounded worried. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just feeling a bit nauseous. That's all. I'm feeling better now," I said without thinking. "That's good," she said as though she did not believe me. I sensed that there was something odd. She was unusually silent and did not say anything for a while. "Babe, please tell me the truth," she said, with a serious tone. "What were you doing at the graveyard?" A chill went down my spine. I was genuinely puzzled at her words. "I did not go to any graveyard." "What? I didn't go to the graveyard since I came to this town," I said, genuinely confused. "Babe, a lot of people saw you at the graveyard eating dirt," she told me. "You left before anyone could intervene." Hearing this chilled me to my core. Was I losing my mind? Was I actually eating dirt in the graveyard, or did people mistake me for someone else? Recalling what happened in the past, I came to the conclusion that what my girlfriend was telling the truth. We talked a bit more and she genuinely sounded worried. After that, she hung up the phone. On the next day, as I finished work. Daniel called me and asked me to come as soon as possible. So I went there. I knocked on the front door and Diana opened it. She looked worried. She gestured me to come in, so I went in. She led me into the living room and had me sit down on the couch. She sat right next to me and held my hand tight. A few moments later, Daniel entered the living room and sat down next to Diana. "So, son," he started, "I hear that you did some questionable things in the graveyard." There was silence in the air. I hesitated to talk. "Well," Daniel broke the silence, "because this happened, you must have stayed on the south beach at sunset." He was right. I nodded. His expression changed to a slightly angry one. "Son," he said, "I told you clearly. Do not stay at the south beach at sunset." I explained to him what had happened to me there in full detail, as well as everything that happened between me and the old lady. "I see. You've been seeing this old lady almost every evening?" Daniel asked. "Yes," I answered. "What did she say her name was?" Daniel asked. "Matilda," I answered. Daniel's eyes widened. I looked at Diana. She had the same reaction. There was silence for a few moments. "Son," Daniel replied, "Matilda died years ago. She is my mother, and she is Diana's grandmother." It shocked me to my core. I could not believe it. This meant that the old lady I was talking to all along was Diana's grandmother. Questions popped up in my head after the other. Why did the old lady lie about her children being far away if she was a ghost? Was she evil or something? "So that's the shape it took, huh?" Daniel said, as though he was talking to himself. "What do you mean?" I asked him. "That nasty thing. It's not real. She is not real. That is only one shape among many others that nasty thing takes," Daniel said. "Even my daughter Lily." Daniel suddenly stopped. "It's okay, Dad," Diana reassured him, holding his hand. "My daughter Lily," Daniel continued. "That thing is tormenting her too. We only realized it recently." I was shocked. So the thing that has been causing Lily to get sick all the time was that thing? Almost right at that time, Lily entered the room. She looked at me and smiled. "Mr. Humpty likes you, Big Brother," Lily said to me. "Mr. Humpty wants Big Brother to hang out with him. Come." Before I could answer, Lily was pushed away by an unseen force, and she started struggling against something on the ground. It was as though something invisible was trying to strangle her. Before we could reach her, she stopped. She had passed out. Daniel took her in his arms as he cried. He was whispering something that I couldn't quite make out. After that, he went out of the room. I could see Diana covering her face with her hands, crying. I tried to console her the best I could. When she finally calmed down, I asked her to tell me everything. She told me what happened. They were having a barbecue in the evening, near the woods with their neighbors. Lily was playing with a few girls her age. When they took their eyes off Lily, she disappeared into the woods. They searched for her all over the place, only to find her standing still at the south beach at sunset. She had been acting like that ever since that event. She would get frequently sick and would not be able to get out of the house. According to Diana, they were a safe distance away from the south beach. She had no idea about how Lily went to the south beach through the woods. There was no doubt in my head about it. Lily went through the same thing I did. Diana also told me that people who have been targeted by the entity see it in different forms. For me, it was in her grandmother's form. For Lily, it was someone divided by something else. Diana told me that someone was brutally murdered by some thugs at the south beach at sunset nearly 40 years ago. I knew what she was getting at. It was his vengeful spirit that was haunting the south beach. Obviously, it was a lot for me to take in. My entire world has changed within a span of a few days. Above all, I knew that whatever that thing was, it wasn't done with me. Deep in my heart, I wished that that thing would leave me alone. As much as I did not want to believe that it was real, I did. I wondered why others were fine even though they went to the south beach at sunset. Why Lily? To this day, I'll never know. Diana didn't seem to have an answer either. In the following days, the activity intensified. I would hear distant laughing, talking nearly every time I went outside. Activity started happening everywhere except my home. The other day, my coffee mug was pushed by an unseen force, breaking it to pieces when it hit the floor. Another time, I would see shadow figures moving at humanly impossible speeds, so I reduced the time I spent outside. My contact with Diana was very limited. I could not pick up her calls, even though I knew she was worried. My mind was just too occupied with the activity that was happening to me. The activity at my workplace worsened as I stopped going outside, except when I had to work. The shadow figures I would see in my workplace evolved into unnatural entities. One particular day, as I was working past the normal hours, without anyone else but me, I caught something in the corner of my eye. In a cubicle in the same row as mine was a shadow-like face with no features except for its gigantic eye. Only half of its face was visible. I jolted, as if noticing my movement. It put its head back in the cubicle it was in. It was only there for a moment. I did not take my eyes off the cubicle it was in and went up to that cubicle. To my surprise, the cubicle was empty. I was too scared at that point, so I was about to go home. As I reached the exit, I saw a creature, the same creature from before, with its gigantic eyes. This time, its face was visible. It was a distorted face. Its body was like a bodybuilder's. It had 8 legs that on its human-like torso. It looked very much like a spider. Upon seeing it, I heard hysterical women laughing from all directions. At least, that is the thing I remember before fainting. On early morning the next day, I woke up in the graveyard without knowing how I went there. I looked at the visible parts of the street. There was no one around. Figures, since it was early morning after all. I quickly hurried towards my house, my body aching with pain. After reaching my house, I decided to call someone, anyone who can help me. I reached for my phone in my pockets, only to realize that it was gone. I was too scared to be outside, so I couldn't afford to go back and search for my phone. So I went inside my house and took a shower. The weight that I had felt the whole time was gone as soon as I entered my room. That was when I noticed the wounds on my body. There were scratches and bruises everywhere. What happened to me last night? I wondered. Still, the image of the spider-like creature lingered in my head. Those gigantic eyes, the distorted face. If possible, I never wanted to see the creature again. After showering, I lay on the bed, thinking. Not too long after, I heard knocks on the door of my room. I opened the door. It was Diana. She looked very worried and sad. She asked me to tell her everything about what has been happening to me, so I did. She called her dad and told him the whole story. She and her dad offered to help me with this situation, and I accepted gratefully. I had heard that Lily went through this similar experience, and with the help of some exorcists, it is not as intense anymore. Ever since that, I haven't gotten out of my house much. I am currently taking leave from work, thank God for vacation leave. I've seen a few exorcists, but my condition hasn't improved. Every time I go out of my house, I see that spider-like creature in the shadows, looking at me. Sometimes, it disappears. Other times, it runs towards me with inhuman levels of speed and I would faint, only to wake up with scratches all over my body. Oh, and I also figured out that staying in my house keeps it away, so I am spending more and more time in my house. Diana is helping me with food and errands. Thank God I have such a wonderful girlfriend like her. I'm too scared to go outside anymore. At the same time, I am wishing to be rid of this curse, ghost, spider, or whatever it is, so I'll remain in my safe haven until exorcists are able to get rid of this entity. I could have flown home, but I thought a drive would clear my head. I'd just finished 4 years in the Marines, 4 of the messiest years of my life. I had made the mistake of bringing my new wife to California with me and returned from Iraq to find her warming someone else's bed. The bed in question was of a fellow Marine, someone left on base while I fought and bled for my country. After 6 months of staying on base so I could meet with lawyers and finish my divorce, I was officially out and done. When I told my dad that I was going to rent a car and drive home, he understood. I told him I needed to come back slow so I could clear my mind, and he told me to drive safe. Take your time, kid. We'll be here when you get back, he said, and I took him up on it. I was coming cross-country, California to Tennessee, and I was seeing the sights and taking in the local flavor. I had decided to make this a long overdue vacation. I did a lot of thinking on that trip, but my only mistake was picking the kid up. I was driving through Oklahoma, enjoying the sights, and feeling like I could watch the hills and valleys roll by forever, when I saw the kid standing there with his thumb out. He was young, couldn't have been old enough to enlist, despite his army coat. It was July, the heat stifling, but he was wearing fatigues and a service jacket that looked antique. A breeze ruffled his hair, pushing it back in a harsh puff that made me think of kids blowing on dandelion fluffs. Maybe it was the jacket, or maybe it was the look of naked want on his face, but I pulled up beside him and rolled the window down. "Hey kid, you need a lift." He turned his perfect sky blue eyes to me, and I'll never forget his words. I sometimes hear them in my sleep. "I sure do. Can you give me a lift to McMahon?" "Mister, God will thank you if you do." I thought that was a little weird, but I told him to climb in and he did so gladly. The signs told me McMahon was about 30 miles up the road, and I expected the kid to chatter like a squirrel the whole way. To my surprise, he was quiet. His eyes closed and his head bowed for the first couple of minutes. It took me a second to realize he was praying, and when he finished, he Saturday up and plastered a half-daffy grin on his face. "God tell ya I was a straight shooter," I asked, more to break the ice than anything. He said to thank you for your assistance. "Mister, you will be greatly rewarded in his kingdom." I nodded, thinking I could use all the help I could get. The farther we drove, the more I began to suspect that something was off about the kid. He stared forward the whole way, his blue eyes on the horizon, and his mouth seemed set in an eternal grin. He wasn't as young as I'd thought, maybe 18 or 19, and the jacket had the name Harris stenciled on it. It was covered in patches too, the kind you get for service, and I was glancing at one on his left breast when I saw the bulge under the coat. I felt a cold shudder run through me as I recognized it. The kid was packing. "You look a little young for the service." "Kid," I said, trying to dissuade some of my fears. "Your brother give you that jacket. Was he in Iraq like me?" "My dad left it to me when he died," the kid said matter-of-factly. "Sorry to hear that. Was he in Iraq?" "The Gulf War," he said, his voice not matching the grin. "He enlisted before it started and was there for a couple years after it ended." I nodded. I bet he had some stories. I had been about to start on one of my sandbox tales, but the kid cut me off suddenly with the last thing I expected. "Do you believe in God?" "Mister," I blinked, the subject unexpected. "Not really." "Kid," I answered, being honest, "I'm an atheist. Have been ever since what happened to me overseas. I think that if there is a God, it's pretty crummy of him to let us live here like this." I had expected a fight, but the kid just nodded. "He forgives you for that. Daddy was like you," Mama said. "Before he went to war, he saw something over there, bad things, and he came back from the war looking for God. He said he had seen some things over there that scared him and made him want to be better, and he couldn't do better without some help. So he came back and started looking for a purpose, and he found one. He found a lot of people offering purpose, but only one who delivered. By the time I was born, he was part of the family." I listened politely, not wanting to interrupt the kid, but the way he was talking about his dad's search for God made me a little concerned. It didn't seem like a happy memory. "I was born into the family. Father Marcus was our everything, our teacher, our preacher, our second father, and our salvation. He brought lots of people together, lots of lost people, but that wasn't enough. Father Marcus wanted more. He had plans, big plans, but they wouldn't turn out be so good for us." He was quiet for a minute, looking out the glass and seeming lost in thought. I thought again that he had to be a kid, couldn't be out of high school, but maybe it was just whatever was wrong with him. Even though his eyes looked like he was in the worst pain imaginable, he still wore that plastered-on grin that never reached those eyes. He was like a doll with a troubled owner, a doll that smiles through its destruction. When I was 10, Father Marcus told the congregation that the end times were coming. He told them that the government was going to come down and take everything that we had built here, that the devil was set against us, and we needed to escape. He told everybody to sell their things, bring the bare minimum, and come to a place that he had found. It was a farm on the outskirts of town, a big farm that had once been a dairy. They gave him their money so that he could secure their paradise, free from anything that the government or the devil or anybody else might do, and came there to start their new lives. We were hopeful that this would be our paradise, but it wasn't a paradise. In the end, it was a prison. I felt a chill run up my spine as he said that. I wanted to tell him to stop. I didn't want to hear the end of it. But instead, I just listened. The kid was hurting. That was clear enough. But his story was so captivating. It was like one of those true crime stories. The ones so bad that you just know it has to be true. I kept my eyes on the road and listened, just letting him tell it, already knowing that it wouldn't have a happy ending. We were basically his slaves. We worked in the fields. We took care of the animals. We kept the big house, where he lived, and did his bidding. Father Marcus came down to spit the hellfire every night, and to pass down new edicts and rules. Men were not permitted in the big house. No one but Father Marcus could lay with a woman, even within a marriage. All children were Father Marcus's children, but his actual children were special. Eventually, he took all the women that he liked up to the house to populate the earth. He took my sister up there with him, and we never saw her again. People didn't like it much. But what could they do? Father Marcus was keeping us safe from the apocalypse. Right, so we followed his orders, until everything fell apart. We rolled into the outskirts of McMahon then, the farms and barns making me think of the place the kid was talking about. I wondered, suddenly, where we were going, and why the kid wanted to go to McMahon so badly. Every mile felt like an eternal march, and I was dreading coming to the end of the journey. Where I started, but the kid seemed to be expecting my question. "Stay on the main road, mister," he said, clearing his throat before going on. He seemed as dry as an old stick, and when I reached behind the seat and offered him a Coke from the cooler, he took it with a smile. I wondered why I had done that. I didn't want the kid to go on. But in a way I did. I needed the end of it. I needed to know how it had all shook out. I was a curious bastard. It seemed, and I needed to see the bodies in this kid's path. Then one day, he gathered us in the barn and told us that the end was near. He told us we needed to prepare ourselves to go, because we were meeting God tonight. He gave us all something to drink, something in a red cup that his wives dipped out, and we all drank it. No one argued, no one fought him. We were all so brainwashed that we would have jumped in front of the 6:15 train that ran near the farm if he'd asked. Everyone drank, everyone obeyed, and everyone went to sleep. They stayed asleep too, except me. I woke up in the hospital with tubes in my arms and my wrists secured to the bed. The police were there, one of them waiting in the room with me, and they had questions. It turned out that they once had been coming. Not God. They had arrived to find everyone dead, fallen around the barn like dolls, but had managed to get there in time to save me. I don't know why I lived while everyone else died, and it ate me up for a long time. Father Marcus, my family, everyone was gone, and I had been left behind. No one wanted anything to do with me. My dad had burned a lot of bridges before we went into the family, and none of them wanted to take in a moody 16-year-old who'd just been through hell. So I went into the system, going from group home to group home, until a couple weeks ago, I clutched the wheel hard, suddenly very worried about what we might find in McMahon. The town was coming up now, a nice old brick town that looked downright picturesque. We passed a sign for a new megachurch, the Sunrise Gospel House, and there was a smiling old guy beaming down from the front. The kid shot a glare at him and patted his heart, inevitably patting the piece as well. I suddenly wondered who was in McMahon that this kid needed to see. I was watching TV in the group home, and an ad came on for a church. The church had recently acquired its own network, and the pastor of the church was very familiar. He spoke about peace and God's love. But all I could hear was the voice that told us to drink the juice and go meet God. As I watched him smiling and hugging people, I heard a very different voice in the back of my mind. It was God, the real God, and he told me what I had to do. He said I needed to be his sword, and I needed to cleave the unrighteous from his midst. He patted the gun again, whispering a prayer to God, and my hair stood up on the back of my neck as something strange and strange wafted from the kid. At that moment, he felt very righteous. We were well into town now, rolling up Main Street, and he told me to stop. I dropped the kid off at the light, and he thanked me, saying he could make it from here. He gave me a real smile then, not the doppy one he'd been wearing the whole way through his sad little tale, and waved at me. "God bless you, mister. I'm off to do his work." Then he was gone, and I sat there watching him go until someone politely honked behind me, and I was forced to roll along. I wasn't sure what to do as I made my way out of town. Did I tell someone? If this pastor had really messed the kid up like that, then maybe he had it coming. Was that really my call to make? Though, in the end, I called the McMahon Police Department and told them what I suspected. I told them about the kid and the story he had spilled, but I don't think they took me seriously. The dispatcher seemed like the report was going in a little pile of crackpot shit, but I felt I had done my due diligence. I was still thinking about it when I stopped for the night, wondering where the kid was and what he was doing as I drifted off to sleep. I woke up the next day and turned on the news to see that Pastor Michael Wheeler of the Sunrise Gospel House had been shot in front of his congregation. The pastor, someone wanted by the FBI for his alleged connection to several past cults, had been shot by someone from one of his past religious orders. The kid was in custody, but police were already saying he was mentally unwell, and this was likely a retaliation slaying. Police were still looking for a mysterious caller who had tipped them off before the shooting, and they had many questions for that individual. I left Oklahoma as quickly as I could, flinching every time I saw a cop. That was a couple of years ago, and I've never told anyone what happened on that trip home. It's something that's weighed on me since I let that kid out on Main Street, and I can only imagine that he was right about God blessing me. I came back, found a job that paid well, met the love of my life, and settled into wedded bliss fairly easy. It all seemed very easy while it was happening, and I can't help but wonder if a little divine direction had something to do with it. As long as he doesn't point me at his enemies like he did that kid, I suppose we can be square. It was supposed to be a simple celebration. My roommates and I had just finished our final exams, officially concluding our college careers. The quiet streets of Maple Grove seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as another academic year came to an end. Our little rental house, nestled between ancient oaks and well-manicured lawns, buzzed with the kind of energy only freedom brings. "Oh my God. I cannot believe we are actually done," Sophie exclaimed, her excitement palpable as she flopped onto our worn leather couch, dark curls bouncing. I grinned, still riding the high of turning in my last paper. I know, right, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And now we're free women. Megan emerged from the kitchen, arms laden with bottles. And you know what that means? Ladies, we celebrate. We cheered, clinking our bottles together in a toast to our success. As the night wore on, our laughter grew louder, our stories more animated. It felt like we were standing on the precipice of something grand. The whole world stretched out before us. Okay, I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes after Sophie's impression of our ancient history professor. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starving. Should we order something? Ooh, yes. Megan perked up. I've been craving that new Thai place. What's it called? Spice Palace. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Their pad thai is to die for. I pulled out my phone, navigating to our favorite delivery app. As I scrolled through the menu, my stomach growled in anticipation. We huddled around the screen, debating appetizers and main courses with the seriousness of scholars discussing ancient texts. Finally, our order was placed. The app cheerfully informed us that our food would arrive in about 45 minutes. We settled back, content in the knowledge that delicious food was on its way. So, Megan said, a mischievous glint in her eye, now that we're officially done with college, who's excited for the real world? Sophie groaned dramatically. Do not remind me. I still have no idea what I'm doing with my life. I was about to chime in when my phone buzzed. Glancing down, I saw a notification from the delivery app. Oh, looks like our food is on its way, I announced. But as I opened the message, a chill ran down my spine. Instead of the usual automated update, there was a personal message from our driver. Can't wait to meet you, lovely ladies. See you soon. I frowned, showing the screen to Megan and Sophie. Is it just me, or is this kind of creepy? Sophie peered at the message. That is strange. Maybe he's just being friendly. Megan shrugged, but I noticed a flicker of unease in her eyes. Yeah, probably nothing to worry about. Some people are just overly familiar, you know. I nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. We returned to our conversation, but I couldn't help glancing at my phone every few minutes. The cheerful atmosphere from earlier had dimmed slightly, replaced by a subtle tension we all felt but didn't acknowledge. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. We all jumped, then laughed nervously at our reaction. I'll get it, I said, standing up. As I approached the door, I heard Megan call out, "Be careful." I rolled my eyes, but my heart was beating a little faster than normal. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The man standing on our porch was unremarkable, average height, average build, with short brown hair and a forgettable face. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Evening, ladies," he said, his voice oddly smooth. "I've got your order right here." I forced a smile. "Thanks," I said, reaching for the bags. As I took them, his fingers brushed against mine. They were ice cold. "Enjoy your meal," he said, his eyes roving past me into the house. "I hope we'll see each other again soon." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back to his car. I quickly shut the door, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Everything okay?" Sophie called from the living room. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a little shaky. "Just a weird vibe, I guess." I brought the food into the living room, and we tried to recapture our celebratory mood. The food was delicious, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. As we were finishing up, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the delivery app. "Hope you enjoyed the food. You girls sure look like you're having fun in there." I almost dropped my phone. "Guys," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "look at this." Megan read the message, her face paling. "What the fuck? How does he know we're having fun? Can he see us?" Sophie jumped up, rushing to the windows to check the curtains. "They're all closed," she reported, her voice tense. "He can't see us." I refreshed the app, hoping it was just a glitch, but there was another message waiting. "Don't bother checking the windows. I don't need to see you to know what you're doing. I'll always know." We huddled together on the couch, all pretense of celebration forgotten. Our phones lay silent on the coffee table, but they seemed to loom over us, harbingers of messages we were too afraid to read. "What do we do?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head, at a loss. What had started as a night of triumph had twisted into something dark and terrifying. And I had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. As if in response to my thoughts, all three of our phones buzzed simultaneously. We looked at each other, fear mirrored in each of our eyes. Slowly, I reached out and turned my phone over. The message glowed on the screen, 5 words that made my blood run cold. "Let's play a game, shall we?" The words on the screen seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. What kind of sick game did this guy have in mind? "We should call the police," Sophie said, her voice quivering. She reached for her phone, but before her fingers could touch it, all our devices buzzed again. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. The police can't help you now. Besides, that would ruin our fun." Megan let out a choked sob. "How is he doing this? It's impossible." I tried to think rationally, despite the fear clouding my mind. He must have hacked our phones somehow, or maybe he's got access to the delivery app's data. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness. When they came back on, Sophie was pale as a sheet. "How did he do that? It's like he's everywhere." As if in response, another message appeared. "I have my ways. Now, shall we begin our game?" My hands shook as I typed a reply. "What do you want from us?" The response was almost immediate. "To play." "Of course. Here are the rules. I'll give you a series of tasks. Complete them, and you live. Fail, and, well, let's just say you won't like the consequences. Your first task, bring me a gift. You have 1 hour. The clock starts now." "This is insane," Megan hissed. "We can't actually do what he says. Can we?" Before I could respond, we heard a loud thump from upstairs. We all frowned, staring at each other in horror. Did you hear that?" Sophie whispered. I nodded, my heart pounding. Maybe it's just the house settling. Another thump, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps. "Oh God," Megan whimpered. "He's in the house." We huddled closer together on the couch, paralyzed with fear. The footsteps seemed to move from room to room upstairs, occasionally pausing as if searching for something. "We need to get out of here," Sophie said, her voice thick with fear. I nodded, trying to think through the panic. "Okay, let's make a run for it. On 3, we dash for the front door. 1, 2. Before I could say 3, all our phones buzzed again. The message made my blood run cold. Leaving so soon, but I haven't found my gift yet. The footsteps upstairs suddenly stopped. Then, slowly, we heard them approaching the stairs. Quick, the kitchen, I hissed. We scrambled off the couch and into the kitchen, frantically looking for anything we could use as a weapon. As I pulled open a drawer, grabbing a large knife, Megan gasped, "My phone, it's gone." A chill ran down my spine. How had he managed to take it without us noticing? Just then, Sophie's phone chimed with a text. Her hands trembling, she opened the message. It was from Megan's number. "I'm upstairs. Help me. He's coming." We all stared at the phone in disbelief. Megan was right next to us, her face as white as a sheet. "It's a trick," I whispered. "He's trying to lure us upstairs." The lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, we heard the stairs creak. He was coming down. "The back door," Sophie mouthed, pointing. Clutching our makeshift weapons, we crept towards the back of the house. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. Just as we reached the door, all our phones buzzed simultaneously. "You can run, but you can't hide. I'll always find you. Always." With shaking hands, I unlocked the back door. We burst out into the cool night air, not daring to look back as we ran into the darkness of our backyard. As we reached the fence, I realized with growing horror that this was only the beginning of our nightmare. We were out of the house, but we were far from safe, and our tormentor was still out there, always one step ahead. Our feet pounded against the damp grass as we ran, the cool night air burning in our lungs. The shadows of the trees seemed to reach out for us, every rustle of leaves sounding like footsteps in pursuit. Megan and I vaulted over the back fence, landing hard on the other side. "Come on," I gasped. Grabbing Megan's arm, we sprinted down the alley behind our house, not daring to look back. It wasn't until we reached the end of the block that I realized something was terribly wrong. The pounding of feet behind us had faded to just 2 sets, mine and Megan's. "Wait," I panted, skidding to a stop. "Where's Sophie?" Megan's eyes widened in horror. We both turned back towards our house, straining to see through the darkness. That's when we heard it, a blood-curdling scream that could only belong to Sophie. "No," Megan cried, already moving back the way we came. As we approached our house, my heart nearly stopped. There, illuminated by the porch light, stood our tormentor, and in front of him, a knife pressed against her throat, was Sophie. "Help me," Sophie's terrified voice carried to us, her French accent thicker than ever in her panic. The man's eyes gleamed, a dim light, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "Welcome back. Ladies, I knew you wouldn't abandon your friend." Suddenly, every light in the house and on the porch went out, plunging us into total darkness. Sophie let out another piercing scream, abruptly cut short. "Sophie," I yelled, my voice cracking with fear. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Megan's phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling hands, she pulled it out and read the message aloud. "If you want to see your friend alive again, come inside. Let's finish our game." I felt sick to my stomach. "We can't just leave her," I whispered. Megan nodded, her face pale but determined. "We have to go back in." Slowly, we crept towards the house. The front door stood slightly ajar, a silent invitation into our own personal hell. As we crossed the threshold, the floorboards creaked beneath our feet, announcing our presence to whatever horror awaited us inside. The house was pitch black and eerily quiet. We fumbled our way through the familiar space, now made strange and threatening by the darkness and our fear. "Sophie," I called out softly, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. We made our way to the living room, our eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. The faint moonlight filtering through the curtains cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. Suddenly, Megan grabbed my arm. "Look," she hissed, pointing to the coffee table. There, illuminated by the glow of its screen, Saturday Sophie's phone. A video was playing on loop, footage from earlier that evening, showing the 3 of us laughing and celebrating. Our own faces stared back at us, frozen in a moment of joy that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. A new message popped up on the screen. "Such happy memories. Shame they have to end." The lights flickered back to life, momentarily blinding us. As my vision cleared, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the wall, written in what looked horribly like blood, were the words, "Third floor. Me, Ala Northeast." Megan and I exchanged a terrified glance. We both knew our house didn't have a third floor. Another message appeared on Sophie's phone. "TikTok. Ladies, your friend doesn't have much time." "What do we do?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "We have to find her, whatever sick game this guy is playing. We can't let Sophie pay the price." Megan nodded, her face set with grim determination. "Together." I grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "Together." As we started towards the stairs, the house seemed to groan around us. Each step felt like it might be our last, the darkness ahead promising nothing but more terror. Our hearts pounded in our ears as we climbed the stairs, each creak of the old wood sending a jolt of fear through us. As we reached the second floor landing, we hesitated. There was no third floor, but there was an attic. Could that be what he meant? Suddenly, a loud thump came from above. We both looked up, frouncing in terror. Then, before either of us could react, something fell from the attic opening. Something heavy, something human. Sophia's lifeless body hit the floor with a sickening thud. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only stare at the broken form of my friend, her eyes open and glassy, staring at nothing. "No," Megan whimpered beside me. "No, no, no." Our phones buzzed simultaneously. With shaking hands, I pulled mine out. The message played automatically. In Sophia's voice, "You broke the rules, so there were consequences. Who will be next?" I wondered. I felt like I was going to be sick. How was this possible? Sophia was dead, right in front of us. How could we be hearing her voice? Suddenly, another sound cut through the silence. A voice, tinny and distant, coming from Megan's pocket. 911? What's your emergency?" I turned to Megan, realization dawning. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. Before I could respond, our phones buzzed again. This time, the message was in the stalker's voice. "Naughty girls, I told you not to call for help. Now you'll both pay." The house fell into an eerie silence. We stood there, paralyzed by fear and grief, for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The stalker was nowhere to be seen or heard, which somehow made it even more terrifying. "We need to get out of here," I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. "We can't stay here with Sophia." I couldn't bring myself to say Sophia's body. Megan nodded, tears streaming down her face. We carefully made our way downstairs, every shadow making us jump, every creak of the floorboards sending our hearts racing. We huddled in the living room, away from windows, constantly checking our phones for any messages from our tormentor. But there was nothing. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. "Do you think he's gone?" Megan asked after what must have been an hour. I shook my head. "I don't know, but we can't stay here forever. We need to make a run for it." Just as we were gathering our courage to leave, we heard it, the distant wail of a siren. Relief flooded through me. The police were coming. We were saved. "Come on," I said, grabbing Megan's arm. "Let's go meet them." We ran to the front door, hope giving us a second wind. But as we burst onto the porch, that hope turned to ash in my mouth. There was indeed a car with sirens approaching, but it wasn't a police cruiser. It was an ordinary car with a siren light stuck to the roof. And as it pulled up, I saw a face that made my blood run cold. It was him, our tormentor. He had been waiting, biding his time, setting up this final, cruel trick. "Run," I screamed, turning back towards the house. But Megan hesitated for a split second too long. The crack of a gunshot split the air. Megan cried out, stumbling forward before collapsing on the porch steps. It was supposed to be a simple celebration. My roommates and I had just finished our final exams, officially concluding our college careers. The quiet streets of Maple Grove seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as another academic year came to an end. Our little rental house, nestled between ancient oaks and well-manicured lawns, buzzed with the kind of energy only freedom brings. "Oh my God, I cannot believe we are actually done," Sophie exclaimed, her excitement palpable as she flopped onto our worn leather couch, dark curls bouncing. I grinned, still riding the high of turning in my last paper. I know, right, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears. And now we're free women. Megan emerged from the kitchen, arms laden with bottles. And you know what that means? Ladies, we celebrate. We cheered, clinking our bottles together in a toast to our success. As the night wore on, our laughter grew louder, our stories more animated. It felt like we were standing on the precipice of something grand. The whole world stretched out before us. Okay, I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes after Sophie's impression of our ancient history professor. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starving. Should we order something? Ooh, yes. Megan perked up. I've been craving that new Thai place. What's it called? Spice Palace. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Their pad Thai is to die for. I pulled out my phone, navigating to our favorite delivery app. As I scrolled through the menu, my stomach growled in anticipation. We huddled around the screen, debating appetizers and main courses with the seriousness of scholars discussing ancient texts. Finally, our order was placed. The app cheerfully informed us that our food would arrive in about 45 minutes. We settled back, content in the knowledge that delicious food was on its way. So, Megan said, a mischievous glint in her eye, now that we're officially done with college, who's excited for the real world? Sophie groaned dramatically. Do not remind me. I still have no idea what I'm doing with my life. I was about to chime in when my phone buzzed. Glancing down, I saw a notification from the delivery app. Oh, looks like our food is on its way, I announced. But as I opened the message, a chill ran down my spine. Instead of the usual automated update, there was a personal message from our driver. Can't wait to meet you, lovely ladies. See you soon. I frowned, showing the screen to Megan and Sophie. Is it just me, or is this kind of creepy? Sophie peered at the message. That is strange. Maybe he's just being friendly. Megan shrugged, but I noticed a flicker of unease in her eyes. Yeah, probably nothing to worry about. Some people are just overly familiar, you know. I nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. We returned to our conversation, but I couldn't help glancing at my phone every few minutes. The cheerful atmosphere from earlier had dimmed slightly, replaced by a subtle tension we all felt but didn't acknowledge. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. We all jumped, then laughed nervously at our reaction. Pain exploded in my leg as another shot rang out. I fell, my leg giving way beneath me, but adrenaline and terror propelled me forward. Limping badly, I managed to drag myself back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I could hear him outside, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He was in no hurry. He knew he had me trapped. Choking back sobs of pain and fear, I limped through the house, desperately searching for a place to hide. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and I could feel warm blood soaking through my jeans. As I huddled in a dark corner of the kitchen, clutching a knife in my shaking hands, I heard the front door open. Slow, measured footsteps moved through the house. Come out, wherever you are, his voice sang softly. The game isn't over yet. I closed my eyes, trying to control my ragged breathing. This couldn't be how it ended. It couldn't. In the distance, I heard more sirens, real ones this time. Was it possible? Could help really be on the way? The footsteps paused, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, chaos erupted. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house. Police! Drop your weapon. I huddled deeper into my hiding spot in the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. The voices seemed to be coming from the living room. Clear, I heard someone shout. Then, Jesus Christ, we've got a body here. My breath caught in my throat. Megan. Baker. Check upstairs. I'm going in further, a gruff voice commanded. I heard more footsteps, slower this time, more cautious. They were getting closer to the kitchen. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. It wasn't the police, it was him, the stalker. Officer down. Suspect is armed, someone yelled. Chaos erupted. More gunshots. The sound of furniture being overturned. Grunts of struggle. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the terrifying sounds. Then, 3 rapid shots in succession, followed by an eerie silence. Suspect is down. I repeat. Suspect is down. I held my breath, not daring to move. This is Roberts. We need 2 buses. 1 officer hit. Suspect down. And we've got 2 civilian casualties. 2 casualties. Megan and Sophia. A sob escaped my throat before I could stop it. Wait. I heard something. Kitchen area. Proceed with caution. Footsteps approached slowly. The kitchen light flicked on. I squinted against the sudden brightness, raising my knife with a trembling hand. It's okay, a gentle voice said. You're safe now. I'm Officer Ramirez. Can you tell me your name? Tears of relief streamed down my face as I lowered the knife. Emily, I choked out. My name is Emily. It's been 6 months since that horrific night. 6 months since I lost my 2 best friends. 6 months since my life changed forever. The police told me later what happened. The real 911 operator had dispatched units to our location after Megan's call was cut short. They arrived just in time to save me, but too late for Megan and Sophia. Our stalker, as it turned out, was more disturbed than we could have imagined. His name was Robert Caldwell, a 34-year-old former IT specialist with a history of mental health issues and a string of stalking charges. The detectives shared his background with me, hoping it might help me understand. Not that understanding could ever ease the pain. Caldwell had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in his early 20s, but had stopped taking his medication years ago. He had a peculiar delusion that he could predict and control people's fates through elaborate games. His previous stalking charges involved young women who he believed were players in his twisted scenarios. What made him particularly dangerous was his technical expertise. He had worked for several high-profile tech companies before his mental health deteriorated, and he used these skills to hack into our phones and the delivery app. The voice messages were created using advanced voice-mimicking AI software. It was also calculated, so terrifyingly methodical. The most chilling part was learning about his lair, a small apartment filled with surveillance equipment, computers, and walls covered in photos of potential players. We were just his latest victims in a long line of tormented women. The thought of how long he had been watching us, planning his game, still makes me sick to my stomach. Caldwell didn't survive that night. When the police cornered him in our house, he opened fire, injuring 1 officer before he was fatally shot. In a twisted way, his game ended with him as the final casualty. I visit the cemetery every week, laying flowers on Megan and Sophia's graves. Sometimes I talk to them, telling them about my day, my therapy progress, the way the world keeps turning, even though it feels like it should have stopped. I've grown close to their parents. We share a bond of grief that no one else can truly understand. We have dinner together once a month, sharing memories of the girls and supporting each other through the hard days. Sometimes we talk about Caldwell, trying to make sense of the senseless, but mostly we focus on remembering Megan and Sophia as they were, vibrant, loving, full of life. My leg is healed, though I still walk with a slight limp. The physical therapist says it will improve with time. I'm not sure the same can be said for the scars on my soul. I've moved out of the house where it all happened. I couldn't bear to stay there, surrounded by memories and ghosts. My new apartment is small, but it's mine, a fresh start. With our degrees completed just before that fateful night, I found myself thrust into the real world we had all been joking about. But instead of the exciting career I had imagined, I've started working at a local cafe. It's not glamorous, but it's helping me heal in ways I never expected. There's a sense of normalcy in the daily routine, the smell of fresh coffee, the chatter of customers, the simple tasks that keep my hands and mind occupied. And then there's Daniel, my coworker. He's really sweet and kind, always ready with a gentle smile or a corny joke when he sees me struggling. He makes me feel safe in a way I haven't since that night. Daniel knows about my past. It was all over the local news, after all. But he's never pushed me to talk about it. Instead, he's just there, a steady, calming presence. Sometimes, when our eyes meet over the espresso machine, I feel a flutter in my chest that I thought I'd never feel again. The fear never really goes away. I still check my phone obsessively for strange messages, I still flinch at unexpected noises. I still can't order delivery without having a panic attack. But working at the cafe, being around people, especially Daniel, it's helping. Slowly but surely, I'm learning to live again. I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm determined to make my life count. For Megan and Sophia, for myself. If you're reading this, please remember to be careful. The world can be a dangerous place, full of monsters wearing human faces. But it's also full of beauty and love and friendship. Hold on to that, cherish it. And maybe, if you're ordering in tonight, consider cooking instead, or better yet, visit your local cafe. You never know who you might meet there. Stay safe out there. I love open floor layouts. When you grow up crammed in a small house with 3 other kids and your parents all sharing 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, you develop an appreciation for space. I like the breathing room. I like feeling like I can stretch out. It's like the everything the light touches scene from The Lion King when I look at my open floor plan condo. It's a beautiful thing. Move-in was completely painless as well, as I'm on the ground floor. I've got these huge glass panes on either side of the front door. It's a real modern apartment. I've come a long way since my childhood, so it almost feels like the entire street, the open field and trees on the other side. Everything out there is a part of my condo. It's all my domain, my territory. Even when I'm doing chores, I genuinely feel content just looking at it all. I get to see my neighbors walking their dogs and wildlife playing in the grass. I also harbor a great appreciation for films and television shows. So I laid out my furniture to accommodate immersion. When I'm really absorbed in a work, it's basically the only time I don't want to be thinking about how much I love my condo. So, across from the entrance, the TV stands against the wall, and the couch in between, facing the TV. Of course, the kitchen's off to my left. The door to my bedroom is past the dining area to my right. Because of the limited distance between my couch and my TV, my field of view is mostly taken up by the screen. The glare can get annoying on a sunny day due to the aforementioned glass panes by the entrance, but I mostly watch in the evenings, so the trade-off is worth it to me. All I see is the TV. Last night, I was watching a period piece drama that took place in 19th century England. It's great junk food TV for when I get home from work and I don't really want to use my brain. The camera work can be a bit lazy, but the actors look nice and the costumes are really detailed. Consequently, I don't mind when the camera lingers on a shot for a little too long. Moments like that can be immersive in their own way. I felt my eyes start to put up a fight, but there was one episode left in the season, so I decided to stick it out and watch it. Midway through the episode, it happened. I fell asleep. It happens. I can't always force myself awake even when I'm engaged with the story. Never one to admit defeat. I tried to rewind to where I slipped out of consciousness. My entertainment system had other plans. For some reason, I couldn't rewind past a certain point about 5 minutes after I passed out. It was a dialogue scene. A medium profile shot of a girl in a frilly dress and a man in a very nice suit against a floral wallpaper. I tried mashing the button, but I'd hit a wall in the playback. It wasn't supposed to be doing this. The intrigue woke me up fully, and I restarted the entire system. When I hit resume on the show, it put me right back at that point, and the same problem happened again. I hit play to see if that would do anything. And as the characters began discussing their mutual friend, my remote stopped working entirely. There was no useful guidance to be gained from a couple Google searches, so I gave up. I put my phone back in my pocket and looked up, only to be met with silence, and both of the on-screen characters making direct eye contact with the camera. Dead silent. Blank expressions. It felt like they were actually looking at me. When had they stopped talking? I hadn't noticed. For a moment, I thought I must have accidentally paused it, but I could see them breathing. This had never happened before in the entire run of the show. I had no idea what was going on. The girl's expression shifted slightly to this subdued sadness, almost disappointment, like someone at a call center having to scam yet another elderly person out of their retirement. My stomach dropped. Her arm slowly raised, in fits and starts, pointing at the camera, pointing behind me. I felt every nerve in my body charge, a horrible pulse of the most ugly and viscous dread I have ever felt. My hands and feet felt like ice. My neck felt exposed. I was too aware of the skin on the back of my skull tightening up. I had to look. The glass panes. A man, standing just to the right of my door, just outside. His nose too high on his face. Unnaturally long philtrum, Thin, wide lips, his hands between his brow and the glass, leaning in, peering in, peeping, watching, looking. STARIN, GRIGHTA, TMEAN, DMYBODYWASICE. A sort of hyper-awareness. I felt the air in my condo like it was part of my body, like my nerves extended out and beyond my form, and stretched into the cavernous room, the precious space between he and I. I felt every disturbance. I could see everything, hear everything. I was so in the moment that it seemed to stretch on forever. It only lasted milliseconds before every muscle in my body contracted, and I let loose from my throat a distorted white noise, a scraping or scratching scream I've never screamed before. I scrambled to my feet and he just watched. I looked around my apartment for something I could use to defend myself, but finding nothing, I looked back to see him moving away. His legs somehow moving his torso with no sway, no bob, perfectly evenly, as if he was sliding, but you could see his legs taking him, carrying him away, and he didn't break eye contact, not for a second, not for a moment, not for anything. I'd never wanted so badly to curl into a ball and cry and just not exist. Could I even call the cops? He didn't commit a crime. I looked to my kitchen, finding the knives, and in my peripheral vision I saw it. His face was on my screen, two of them, imposed on the characters on my TV, still pointing. My head swiveling, turning like a top on a table, rotation, centrifugal force exercising slightly on my eyes and nose, and the protrusion of the back of my skull. My hair pushed by the air that wanted to stay still. And he was there, just behind my couch, just feet away from me, still with his hands positioned like he was looking through glass. The door unopened. My panic gripped me and I just fell over, genuinely fainted. Today, I awoke to my TV was missing. It was the only thing missing. The police came to my house, looked around. I told them about the man's appearance and behavior, but I left out the images I saw on my TV, the strange blurring of my reality in those moments. I don't think it really matters. I don't even know if it was real. Maybe it was my subconscious filling in the blanks of knowing there was someone watching me. I don't know. Is such a thing possible? Can you tell when someone's watching you?